Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having the best of bestest days ever today. Today we're jumping into some Tales from the Front Desk. Before we start, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But if you stick around, well, there just might be some cake in your near future. Alright, our first story today comes to us from Remarkable Panda 952, entitled Hockey Parents, Bad Parking, and Nearly Instant Karma. Let's jump right in. This happened over 20 years ago, sometime in the winter of 2001-2002, when I was working at the front desk of a large hotel. The hotel was a block from a large event center, which made it popular for anyone going to an event at the center. It's one of the incidents that always stuck with me as an example of karma getting the jerk. There was a large youth ice hockey tournament going on, and we had a long weekend filled with families and their lovely ice hockey crotch goblins that had traveled from all over the Midwest and Intermountain West to attend. Over 80% of our 300-ish rooms were filled with people for this event. Our parking lot was already too small for the hotel, and so we had to remind guests that if they couldn't find parking in our lot, that they could use the lot across the street. At first, we didn't think we needed to point out all the signs about not parking on unpaved areas. Evening before the tourney, all is well as it can be, sends the expected gangs of kids running up and down the hallways and riding the elevators at all hours, but we expected that. At least this was a 13 and under crowd, and they weren't of the age to find a little corner to make out. Parents were generally behaving at this point as well, none of the typical adulterous antics that come with these groups. I got some juicy ones later to post. During the day the next day, it is mostly quiet, with some groups coming in and out to rest when they had longer times between matches. No biggie, until it started to snow, and snow hard. We normally get snow, but it generally doesn't stick around long unless it isn't getting any sun, and typically not more than a few inches. We got about a foot and had massive drifts throughout the lot. This is where the fun begins. What started as a too few parking spaces turned into a massive short of spaces, as no one could see the lines in the lot and people with SUVs and four-wheel drive think they can do anything and park anywhere. And these were the vehicles of choice for hockey families lugging around thousands of dollars in gear. Not many sports kids can participate in can be much more expensive than hockey unless it involves horses. People are parked so poorly we can't get a plow through our lot, and are actively directing people to park in the plowed and flat lot across the street, even offering our shuttle to carry equipment across the street. Of course, they don't, and by the time everyone is somewhat settling in for the night, because at the very least, 2 to 3 games of hockey in a single day do wear the kids out, our parking lot looks like a snow tornado went through it, with vehicles parked pretty much wherever they wanted. Our maintenance manager clocked out and then came back in a few minutes later, telling us there were vehicles parked on the grass, one lifted vehicle over a hydrant, and half a dozen on the pond behind the hotel, but on our property. As I mentioned, snow doesn't stick around all winter, neither does ice, and you couldn't pay me to walk across that pond in winter. How it was holding up not one, but multiple vehicles was nothing short of magic. And even in the snow and drifts, there is plenty of signage and a bridge that goes over part of it. You cannot know that there is a body of water there. We called the night manager to the front, who had been patrolling the halls because of parent drama. Someone fancies someone else, but they are both married and they got caught. And he hears the maintenance manager's report, looks at us and says, "Tow them." I can't say that I didn't take pleasure in calling the tow trucks after all the attitude we got, telling people to park across the street. Between those parked on the pond, over hydrants, and in well-marked no parking zones, 22 vehicles were towed. There were plenty of other vehicles that could have been towed, but only the ones that were in a dangerous situation or could get us fined, like blocking fire zones, got towed. I clock out at 11 p.m. and go home to sleep, and am back at 8 a.m. for the morning shift. No kindness in these swing and morning schedules. All is relatively quiet at first until the hockey families start to head over to the event center for the day around 9 a.m. And then we had 22 rooms with over-the-top angry guests. Our VP, whose office was just behind the front desk, grilled the 2 of us that had been there the evening before, and we reiterated that not only was it the night manager's instructions, but that there were vehicles on the pond, and we'd have been in a lot more trouble if it broke in the morning sun and someone got hurt. We got a blank stare for a moment from him. I don't think it ever occurred to him that a vehicle could drive all the way out onto the pond before he shook his head and came up to the desk to back us up. He loudly reiterated what us at the desk were saying, that there was clear signage of where to park and that they chose to go off-roading and park in dangerous and illegal places. We handed out the information of the tow yard to those who had their vehicles towed, called a handful of cabs. Our shuttle driver ended up dropping a few of them who were actually nice and apologetic off at the tow yard on their way to pick up an airline crew, and we called and gave the tow yard a heads up that they might want backup. Then Mr. McJerkface, obviously not his real name, I couldn't remember it if I tried after all these years, came to give us a grilling. He and his wife and prodigy son were staying in our presidential suite, and how dare we tow his $100,000 top-of-the-line SUV from the center of the pond, no less. And if there was so much as a scratch on it, he would personally sue each of us. And how big of a mistake he made to not have stayed in the insert name of historic 5-star hotel down the road, where they knew how to treat his type of people. He demanded a refund for his room nights, to which our VP firmly refused and told him if he could find a room elsewhere, he was welcome to do so. That wasn't going to happen. Everywhere was booked solid. He eventually left the desk, and the next couple hours had a few other complainers, but mainly those getting their vehicles back, sheepishly sulking back into the hotel, wallets $120 lighter. And then noon hit. Of course, our VP went to lunch just prior, and Mr. McJerkface literally threw open our sliding entrance doors when they did not open for him quick enough, stomped straight towards us gals at the desk. One of our guest service guys popped out and stood between him and us because he was convinced he was going to jump the desk and attack. Mr. McJerkface was beat red. He couldn't get his $100,000 top-of-the-line SUV back because the police had confiscated it. We are half amused at the karma this guy is incurring, but also half terrified, thinking he might be a mobster or something. His wife, who we are finally getting a look at, just looked like an Eastern European mail-order bride who had barely learned an American accent, was trying fruitlessly to calm him down and get him to go back to the room and then go to the hockey game. His kid, who I did genuinely feel sorry for, was watching this tirade looking dumbstruck, holding some of his hockey gear. Another of the front desk gals went into the back and called the police, because honestly, we did not feel safe. She came back out what seemed to be too quickly and whispered to me, "They're already here." I turned my head, and 3 cops come walking in our front door and directly for Mr. McJerkface. Mr. McJerkface still doesn't seem to get it at this point, and turns to the officers and starts berating them for having no right to confiscate his vehicle, how they don't know how to do their jobs, etc. And then the handcuffs came out. Just a note to clarify, we were at a large hotel with a bar, restaurant, convention halls that could hold a couple thousand in total, and our PBX had its own dedicated little button to our city's dispatch. When she had gone back, the dispatch line was lighting up already to give us the heads up that the police were incoming for a guest. Mr. McJerkface got arrested in front of his wife and kid in the middle of our lobby, but it seemed like they'd just walk him out. He was already a bit belligerent with the officers though, and then one of the cops said something to him in which he spit and shouted in the officer's face, "That bee won't get a dime." At which point he was then roughly taken out of the hotel, and the wife and kids scurried off. Our VP was concerned that the credit card would end up with a chargeback, but it never did, and honestly the rest of the tournament was quiet. I think word of what happened spread and scared everyone straight for the last day. At checkout 2 days later, one of the refs for the tournament was paying for his incidentals, as his room had been paid for by the event, and said, "For voucher for breakfast, I'll tell you what happened." I've never seen our desk manager sign a voucher so fast. She had been away the tow day and the aftermath day, but still wanted all the gossip. Ref was older and had been around for a while and knew the whole story. Mr. McJerkface was well known among the hockey tourney officials for being that guy, flaunting his money, causing drama. Huge hockey aficionado, He had another family with 4 kids, 1 boy and 3 girls. The boy was injured when he was just starting to play hockey at the age of 6 or 7, and whatever happened, he couldn't play hockey anymore. Mr. McJerkface attacked the parent of the boy who had crashed into his son instead of accompanying him in the ambulance to the hospital. It was a big, memorable scene, much like the one we experienced. So what did Mr. McJerkface do? He left his family, filed for divorce, and pretty much just ignored they ever existed. Got remarried a few months later, and quickly popped out a little boy who he had on the ice by kindergarten. Boy is 10 now. Ref overheard the wife crying to some of the other moms that he was arrested for the combination of owing nearly $500,000 in back child support and some other unspecified financial crimes, basically hiding his money to avoid paying his first family child support. Dude was literally living the high life with his replacement kid and wife. Apparently, his vehicle getting towed set off the flag that this guy could be found and taken in. And we got a little follow-up. A few weeks later, after a fight in our bar, one of the arresting cops had returned. We asked him if it was true what Mr. McJerkface was arrested for. He told us he can't comment on specifics, but that sometimes judges like to set the bail for the egregious child support evaders, the ones who have it but are probably hiding it, at the amount of their back-owed child support, and really big support, is going to make the news wherever he was sent off to. We all remembered where he was from, and didn't take us long to find the article about the guy with a $500,000 bail over child support, only to get immediately arrested again after he bonded out by the feds. To this day, I still think about how if he had just listened to directions, how differently it would have turned out for him. Love it when karma catches up to a person. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Shalom RPH. It says, "Sounds like the only reason this guy had a family in the first place was to have a kid who played hockey. And once that was no longer possible, he just dumped them and started over. Makes me wonder if he'd been a player in his youth who got invalided out of it like his first son and was trying to relive it vicariously." OP responded to this comment and said, "We legit would make up stories along this line. Our favorite was that he made it in college and got hurt in the game before the pro scouts would have seen him. So this guy completely imploded his whole life over parking his car on a pond. What a friggin' moron." I'm pretty ecstatic that karma caught up with this guy though, because he sounds like an absolutely horrible person, and his previous family deserves that money, so I hope they at least get some of it back. The only major concern I have here though is his new family, which sounds kind of innocent, the wife and the kid who's playing hockey. Well, if they didn't know what's going on, they do now, and their whole world just came crashing down. So I hope the mother and the son have the support that they need going forward, because they definitely can't count on it from their butthole of a dad. Our next story today comes to us from Forsaken Ice 8714. What's the most ridiculous thing a guest has gotten upset over? Let's jump right in. We know we have all had absolutely mad guests, multiple times over. But honestly, this one for me just takes the cake. Let me start with the backstory. So I had a definite male Karen the other day, just super rude and impatient. I should mention that on this day, I'm also training the new FDA on his very first evening shift. My work decided it was fine to just have the two of us, despite the fact that this was his first evening shift. We didn't have many arrivals to start, but it built up to a good 40 or 50. For extra context, the evening shifts at my hotel are an hour shorter, but that only ends up meaning we have to do more in less time in a way, because said shift starts right at the beginning of check-in time. Anyways, because of this, everything would naturally take much longer than usual, because as we're working, I'm teaching this guy everything he needs to learn. Pretty standard for training. Apparently, this guest didn't seem to think that and was very impatient about the fact that I was doing my job by training the new employee, and had a big attitude and was completely rude the entire time I was checking him in. By the way, if you're a guest that snatches your card from a clerk for any reason, just know I hate you. Now, for the most bonkers part of my story, today, the same guest comes down at some point for change for the guest laundry. Okay, fine. Of course, I remember who he is, but am overly nice because that's how I like to deal with Karens. I won't bend over backwards for them or go the extra mile, nor will I go against even the smallest policy. But I will do it all while being super sweet and apologetic, even though I absolutely give 0 Fs. Because of this, some people actually apologize to me for their behavior later on. To me, this feels way better because now I feel like I'm their mom in the situation who has taught them to not be a child with a tantrum anymore. For reference, I used to teach preschool before working hospitality, so I pretty much treat a large portion of my guests the same as I would have my 3-year-old class. Anyways, the guy is actually fairly nice this time, so I figure he must have been having a bad day or whatever the night before and mentally move on. Maybe an hour later he comes back, saying his gloves are missing from the dryer. What? He believes someone stole them out of the dryer and wants us to watch the video feed. I do explain to him that I can't access that. I can only access the live feed and would have to call management for something like that. He insisted I do so, because without his gloves, he will freeze tomorrow, and they are leaving early in the morning. He made my boss come back to work to watch the feed from earlier to see if anyone opened the dryer and stole his gloves. For reference, I do live in a small rural town without a Walmart or anything, but there was an open dollar store, grocery store, and gas station that all sold gloves. I didn't offer this option because we're not supposed to do that, but he didn't even ask about anywhere. In fact, he even said he would file a police report about his missing gloves. My boss had me watch the footage with her when she came in to do so that there would be 2 of us having seen it. Nobody touched his dryer. I called him and informed him of this. During the call, he stated they must have magically disappeared then, and even asked me which dryer he used to see if I actually had watched the video. My boss went back home and I go back to my work. Maybe another hour later, he returns to the desk to tell me he still can't find his gloves. I don't know what to tell him, except to tell him I'm sorry about that. He then starts questioning me about whether I actually watched the video and who the other people in the laundry room were that day, even going so far as to insinuate that it was someone that worked at the hotel. I simply told him that there were guests but no other information, and he left, but was really not happy. I wish I could make this crap up. OP, were you not allowed to look this guy right in the eyes and suggest that maybe the sock monster that lives inside the dryer had cold hands? As for the whole training situation, yeah, I've been there myself, and I know from personal experience going into a store and having a big lineup of people in there because the cashier's training somebody else can be a pain in the butt, but I also understand why it has to happen. One thing you need to think about when you come into a situation like that is you being a butthole is the first experience that this person has working cash, front desk, whatever it is, in their new workplace. And they're gonna think that the job is horrible because the people coming there are a bunch of buttholes. So keep that in mind when you go, because if you started a new job somewhere, you'd want people to treat you with respect as well. Check out both OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.